Hi, this is Lee Einer, and I want to shine the spotlight on the recent cannabis ordinance that was passed by the city of Las Vegas in December of last year. I'm going to say it's a mess. I'm going to say there's a lot of problems with it, and I'm going to lay some of those out. Now, perhaps the biggest is just the idea that it appears to be aimed at discouragement of recreational cannabis use, both personal and, commercial. And the city of Las Vegas, we're a poor community here. We've got a little over 40% of Las Vegas residents that are at or below the federal poverty level. And the recreational cannabis industry is an opportunity to lift a lot of our community members out of poverty if it was managed right. If we gave the little guy support and direction and actually, got behind this industry instead of being reactionary, tough on drugs bumpkins and trying to thwart it. So overall, on that basis alone, I could kind of give this thing a thumbs down. But beyond that are the problems with existing law in this ordinance. And this is not an exception. This administration, while in some respects better than administrations that have come before, I think holds the record for enacting ordinances that are in some aspects in conflict with state law and in some aspects just so ridiculous as to be surreal. For example, the nuisance ordinance that bans, amongst other things, quelites and verdolagas and arugula. Wow, thank God the city council has saved us from arugula. Anyway, back to the cannabis ordinance and the problems therewith. And I'll start with this. It imposes huge fines with each day being a separate violation. So, in other words, this is embarrassing, but if somebody sees a pot plant growing in your backyard and they rat you out, and you're on vacation and you don't get back for 4 or 5 days, well, that's 4 or 5 separate offenses with $1,000 per day fine imposed. And the first problem with that is it's ridiculously, stupidly excessive. There's, at this point, cannabis is legal, whether you're using it for recreation or for medical purposes, it's legal. And that degree of draconian penalty is just completely out of order, but it goes beyond that. For example, I'm looking at the ordinance, and it doesn't just say that they're going to hit you for $1,000 per day. It says they also can shut off your utilities for a separate offense. And let's see, that's paragraph 10 here. The city reserves the right to terminate any city-issued or city-provided licenses, registrations, approvals, utilities, or other such matter upon a second violation of city ordinances. Now, in conjunction, this is the same paragraph, any violation of this section shall incur a non-discretionary fine of $1,000, and each day that a violation occurs shall be a separate offense. So, if you have your pot plant visible in the backyard to a neighbor 2 days running, that's 2 separate offenses. Oh, and since you have a second offense that can shut off your utilities, that is goofy. That's nuts. That's just completely unacceptable. But it goes beyond that. Let's look at what constitutes that hideous crime that would get you $1,000 per day fine. The possession, use, cultivation, and processing of such cannabis for personal use must not be observable or perceptible from the exterior of the primary residence, that's your home, assuming that you own your home, or adjacent or nearby properties, including without limitation, A, common visual observation, including any form of signage, footnote that signage, B, unusual odors, smells, fragrances, or other olfactory stimulus, C, light pollution, glare, or brightness that disturbs others or affects property in the vicinity, or D, noise from ventilation fans and other noise associated with the possession, use, cultivation, or processing of cannabis that disturbs others or affects property in the vicinity. That's the horrible crime. Somebody saw you smoking a doobie in your own home, or, because they looked through the window or whatever, or they saw you smoking in the backyard with your friends, or they saw that you had a pot plant growing in your backyard. Those are the things that get you this ridiculous fine. Now, two things. We said signage, right? How on earth does the city think they have the authority to control what signage I put up on my own property? It's, particularly if it were signage announcing that I might actually partake of a legal herb upon my own property. Saying that gets you $1,000 fine, I'm pretty sure is a First Amendment violation. That is an infringement on my free speech, and I resent it. But beyond that, state law stipulates the power of a municipality to impose a fine, and with a couple of exceptions, I think DUI and some water pollution regulation, the ability of the city to impose a fine for infraction of their ordinance is capped at $500, and it doesn't make a difference whether it's a home rule municipality or not. It's independent of that. So their tough on crime stuff here is actually a crime in its own right. It violates state law. It violates the Constitution. The other thing that's going on here is if you look at state law, we recently legalized recreational use of cannabis. But long before that, we made history for the drafting of an ordinance called the Linen, Air, and Compassionate Use Act, which was the first statute of its kind to be drafted in the United States for medical marijuana. So you have two bodies of law that our ordinance should not conflict with. And yet, when you look at the ordinance, we don't draw a distinction between medical use and recreational use. All of the language refers to personal use, which is a term not defined in state law. Okay? And when you look at the Compassionate Use Act, it actually protects the rights of people who are using marijuana or cannabis for medical purposes. Cannabis has been documented for a long time and used for a long time to treat serious medical conditions. Veterans with PTSD have realized a great deal of benefit from cannabis use. Cancer patients, people on chemotherapy, the list goes on. And the medical cannabis statute protects their right to access cannabis as a therapeutic drug or therapeutic substance for the treatment of their conditions. And I have to say, this ordinance steps on their toes. I think it violates state law in terms of protection of medical cannabis users just up and down the line. It tells personal users where they can and can't smoke. If you rent and do not own your own domicile, then you have to get the owner's permission to use cannabis on the premises. Well, fine if you're a recreational user. Is that fine if you're a cancer patient and you need that cannabis to combat weight loss and loss of appetite? No, that's not okay. That would be your landlord intervening in a decision that should be between you and your doctor and nobody else. And I'm going to leave it here because, frankly, I have a limited time span that I can invest in these videos and still have YouTube publish them. But I am urging everyone to contact their city councilman and ask them straight up, why did you vote for this thing? What were you thinking? It will not survive legal challenge in its present form. And frankly, everybody who looked at this thing and thought it was a good idea should at least metaphorically get spanked. Thank you, and have a good day.